to see.
All right, I think we're good now. Looks like our audio was not on, but it is on now. Hello, everyone. It is good to see you. We've got Wayne on. Everything looks to be working fine. So, oh, we got Big Wayne already. There we go. Boing.
There it is.
I love how your video jumps around like that. I have no idea whatsoever that causes that. But anyway. So, hello, everyone. I see lots of awesome people out there. I hope you're enjoying me using some of my own music as our bumper music now, because that'd be better than just me jumping on and going, hello. So, hello. All right. Before we start, I cut a little promo to help out with our sponsor, Randy from Houston's Lower the Friction. So before we begin on our Saturn venture, I'm going to play that little clip for you guys, and you can tell me if you like my voiceover work. Here we go.
Did you know that 85% of your engine wear occurs at startup? Yes, that is correct. And this is where lower the friction comes in by putting a protective lubricating barrier on moving parts. This now gives you full-time protection to make your engine last longer, run smoother, give you better performance, and improve fuel economy. People across the country are reporting some very exciting results. Go to lowerthefriction.com. Place your order and enter in promo code SOS to get 5% off of your order. That's lowerthefriction.com.
All right. Again, that's Randy from Houston's little venture he's doing, lowerthefriction.com. I'm using it myself, and I'm getting, depending upon where I'm driving, 3 to 5 miles per gallon extra than I was getting before in my little Honda. So, anyway, I noticed a couple people noticed. Yes, I've got quite an Aragorn going on here. I decided to let it grow in for a week. My face was kind of irritated last week when I shaved one day, and I was like, better give it a bit of a break. I'm not overly fond of facial hair. I think it ages me, but whatever. I'm going to leave it go because Rose likes it. Anyway, we still got Jumping Wayne around. Looks like we already got a super chat from somebody. Let me zap back in the chat here and see who hooked us up. Kevin for $7.77. Thank you so much, dude. That's awesome of you. It says I have a little bit more, $9, or maybe that's a translation. Anyway, hopefully the sound is good. Hopefully the audio is good, except for Jumping Wayne, but we can live with Jumping Wayne. All right. Oh, yes, Rose, I'll tell them who I'm supposed to be like. My joke was I'm doing the David Gilmour 1970 look. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, look up pictures of Pink Floyd from 1970. It made me want to go out and buy a black Stratocaster for anybody who knows what that is. But I have a blue one. I don't really need a black one. But I wouldn't turn it down if somebody bought me one. I mean, can't have enough Stratocasters. My tea
showing your age now, Jason.
I'm sorry?
You're showing your age.
Oh, I rank a Pink Floyd. I must be old.
Oh, I must be. Must be an old guy. I don't know. There's a couple of us old guys around now.
The Great Baldini is supposed to be joining us. He said perhaps about 30 minutes late because he was otherwise preoccupied. I have a weird reflection. That is very odd. Can anybody else see that? It's like on my face. I wonder if my thing needs to be wiped off. Let me try that. If not, I'm just going to ride with it as is.
Just roll with it.
Let's see if that helped. I don't know. Maybe something in the room is reflecting. Anyway, who cares? So tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to be discussing Saturn Symbology. And there's a lot to this. Wayne and I kind of broke up how we're going to approach it. I did the mythological stuff since I had just recently done that with shows with Crow. And I kind of knew off the top of my head where to go to find that stuff real quick. But I also added in some of the rabbinical aspects to it. So we're going to go through that. But Wayne is going to actually break down some more of the actual symbols and things like that get attributed to Saturn and why. And as I said, the Great Baldini should be joining us soon. But if he doesn't, we've got plenty of material to cover. Wayne, do you have any opening comments before I go into our first point here?
No, just want to welcome everybody to another live stream here at Secrets of Saturn Live, and put a shout out there to our friends over at the Fringe FM, and also to go ahead and say thank you to Randy from Houston for his sponsorship, and check out lowerthefriction.com, promo code SOS for 5% savings on your order, and from there let's just get right into it.
I'm just checking over the chat here. I appreciate the suggestion of coconut oil. I have tried that before. I'm actually using this stuff called Monat, M-O-N-A-T, that has made light years difference. Now, obviously, as you get older, your hair starts to thin out and stuff like that. Thank God my hairline hasn't changed. But that's what I've been using, and if anybody wants to know more about it, I can't say how good this stuff is. I'm blown away. It's actually Rose's friend that turned us on to it. If anybody wants to know more about how fantastic this stuff is, my hair is growing like crazy. Like, I haven't had it grow this fast since I was in my 20s. So anyway, and I did put it on my beard today just for the hell of it to see if it would do anything. Just out of sheer curiosity. Rose said it made it softer, so we'll see. Anyway, I notice how these live streams are getting more and more informal, which is great because everything I do with Crow is so edited tightly, and everything. I like everything to be perfect. With these, I just like to sit back, relax, let you look at my beautiful Taylor guitar, and talk about my hair. No, just kidding.
Hey, if that's the way the conversation goes, man, that's what we do. If it's all about talking about hair, which Baldini will be on, so there'll be some mention of hair or lack thereof at some point. So that's usually how this thing goes. So, but you have a great pirate name, by the way, Softbeard the pirate.
Softbeard.
So you can always go with that.
I've got me cup of strawberry hibiscus tea. Cool. All right. So, first point we've got on Saturn is, well, let me set it up this way. Has anyone out there seen a documentary called Shoot the Moon? If you haven't, I made it. It's about Crow's work. But a lot of the little captions we put as scene cuts were from something called The Rubaiyat by Omar Khayyam. And this first thing is from that, and I thought that would be a great way to start this off. Up from Earth's center, through the seventh gate I rose, and on the throne of Saturn sate, and many a knot unraveled by the road, but not the master knot of human fate. What do you make of that, Wayne?
That's actually some pretty beautiful poetry. First off, Omar Khayyam was, quite the linguist per se. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot just encoded in that very first statement right there. The seventh gate, and this kind of stuff is all. It's all over the place with the Saturn symbology. There's just so many things associated with Saturn as a concept, not just the planet. And that's where people get confused, because in the modern age now that we're in, when we think of Saturn, we're thinking of this spinning ball out in outer space with rings around it, flying around the universe at, I don't know, millions of miles per hour and circling the sun and everything else. So this is kind of the mindset, the image that media has programmed us with this. So this is kind of what they want us to attribute this to. And they want us to think of it as strictly a physical object in space. And there's so much more involved with the whole Saturn ideology. And it's I prefer to tell people, when they're looking at these things, look at them as more of like a concept or an archetype rather than like a physical object, because that's kind of what we've been given as an image for this thing. So, and this relates back to the whole graven image thing mentioned in the Bible as well. This kind of thing, and this goes along all different things, not just talking about like images of God, but images of a lot of things. Like a lot of these are philosophical concepts that have been just given a physical material identification for people to be able to relate to, but a lot of times they miss the overall underlying ideas that are involved with this. So this is what we're going to look at and explore a little bit more here. So Saturn, it's got a lot of different ties in our world, and we'll see as the mythology kind of unfolds a little bit, and the symbolism's all over the place, even in the modern age. All you have to do is look around at different businesses and just different aspects of our society. The symbolism's everywhere. I mean, it's even right there. That's my wedding ring, right? Where's that come from?
Ring.
Where does the wedding ring idea and concept come from? This relates back to Saturn. So, I mean, there's no denying that this is a visible thing in our sky, but the ideas attributed to it take on a whole life of their own. So, this is kind of where people miss the boat on a lot of this stuff. They're thinking strictly in terms of astronomy when they're looking at this stuff, and they're talking about, flying Cassini probes around it and taking pictures and this and that. This is the kind of image that you're given by our modern scientism that they push. But there's a whole lot more related to this. It's a type of energy. Okay, when it comes down to it, I guess that's the best way to describe it. It's like an archetypal energy that could be played upon for different purposes, and they could, pretty much imbue this energy into different symbols or objects or concepts to push agendas or any number of things. And this is something that escapes a lot of people, because this relates back to the whole idea of magic per se. And, there's a real science to that. This is an ancient science, and people overlook that. This is kind of what we would term as alchemy or natural science, this kind of thing. There's different things related to these energies that we could know things about, as long as we know what we're looking at, or we're taught what this means, or how the timing of it works, and this kind of thing. And that's why it's so important that we study the sky clock, because this is kind of one of the keys to it. These so-called planetary energies can be grasped and utilized by people to benefit themselves. But the power structure, the powers that be at the top of the power pyramid, the elites, they utilize these different concepts themselves for the purposes of control and furthering their own agendas. And they would prefer that, the public at large be ignorant of these archetypal energies. And I that's really kind of the best term I think I could put to words for what this really is when it relates to these planetary forces and things like that. It's more than just a physical object spinning around in space like they would have you believe. So there's different things associated with all the different planets. But tonight we're basically going to look at the whole idea behind Saturn, the Saturnian energies, and things of that nature, and kind of the history of where all this stuff comes from and how it ties into modern religion and just modern science too. I mean, if you want to put it that way, because they utilize a lot of these different concepts in our modern science, and they also push it with the whole science fiction kind of narrative that they've been trying to steer our reality into as well. So there's a lot of different crossovers there. So we'll go ahead and take a look at that, because the symbolism for it's everywhere, first of all. But it's important to understand the backstory. So that's why we're going to touch on like the myth, the mythology, and that kind of thing. So, we could move forward from there, maybe try and stick to the timeline here a little bit and give people a kind of overview of what the original myth is that associates with Saturn.
Absolutely. We've got 2 super chats I want to shout out real quick. Thank you so much, folks. Street Smarts sent $5. Y'all are badasses. Much love. Side note, fluff Star Wars. Cheers and thanks. Another $5 from Brian. Thanks, Brian. I am curious, what do you think the end goal for this Mexican beer calamity is? I think you all can figure that out. Is it forced vaccinations or getting people used to quarantines, etc.? Well, I would say testing the waters more. There's a big funny thing happened that I mentioned when I was on with Jaron and those folks on Monday that Crow and I have been talking about. And there's this mass CEO exodus going on this year. Just look it up. Bob Iger from Disney is probably the most high-profile one that just left his position. But there's tons of people doing that, and it's almost like we got to wonder, is there a shifting of the gears, a changing of the guards? What's going on here? We don't know, but these things are coinciding, apparently. And I think that they're probably doing what they're always doing, and they're trying to move the Overton window. So do I think that this is the lockdown that someone like an Alex Jones would be screaming his head off about? Probably not. But what are they doing? Trying to see, will people take a vaccine? How many people will take a vaccine? How crazy will they go? What's the level of, like, all that stuff? Looks like the Great Baldini is ready to be added in. We'll get to him in just a second. Wayne, do you have anything you want to say about that?
Yeah, actually, I mean, let's put it this way. They're up to no good with this whole idea. This is what they're doing. They are trying to, get people used to the idea of quarantining themselves or being on lockdown and being just totally terrified of this illness, even though there's really no merit to do so. I have seen some things that might suggest that this could be kind of what you would call a sleeper type agent, whereas once you get infected with it, it sticks around with you and causes your body to have further issues in the future. So this could be something I've seen a little bit of scientific evidence from the peer-reviewed journals and all of that stuff that they put out that could suggest that it may cause people to have some immune suppression problems later on down the road. The virus itself is not so scary and bad if you do contract it for the most part, unless you're somebody that fits the profile that it highly affects, like somebody it's a little bit more on in years and fits the specific genetic profile that it seems to adhere to the most, which would be people of Asian. It seems it's not so scary to contract it in and of itself, but it may cause future health problems, immune suppression later on from some of the things I've seen. So I don't know. Is this really something that I'm not sure? The fear porn's off the charts with it, though. I can tell you that. It's ridiculous. I've never seen anything like it. I mean, even going back and looking at all the other scares that they've had years past, it's not nearly as bad as what it is now. Like the way that they're pushing it. Like tonight now, they're just saying somebody in New York City had contracted it and was at Grand Central Station. So now they have about 1,000 families on, voluntary quarantine, and they're shutting down schools and stuff. And I just about an hour before the show here, I was in contact with our buddy Billy Ray Valentine, who lives in New York. And at first he hadn't even heard anything about it, but then he was on his way to class because he goes to school at night. So, and he told me he got to class and they were talking about potentially closing the college down. He's not sure when. So, I mean, people in New York are responding to this now, and it's getting like ridiculous. It's every city. Like I've seen something from almost every major city center across the United States now are all in fear of this virus. So they're definitely up to no good with it. But I could tell you, just from the fear porn they're pushing on the TV, it's off the charts. I think the agenda is something more to the effect of getting people used to the medical tyranny that's coming and that they're planning, and they're going to use this to try to implement. So that's what my take is on it. Take it for what you will.
We've got one more super chat to get to. Thank you so much. Manifest Magical for $5 American. Skies getting assaulted. Sprayed again. Nothing new. Who else is beyond apathy? West Coast fooked. Yeah, that's for sure. I think we got the Great Baldini in with us as well. Is that true?
I am here.
You are here.
I
Welcome,
think I hear
ladies and gentlemen, the Great Baldini.
And I can confirm the spraying. They have been going after it hard and heavy all day, just line after line after line. And I heard you, Wayne, talking about the Corona salt and lime beer thing. I was just at the pharmacy picking up some medications for my wife, and it was crazy. So they had signs everywhere saying all their masks were sold out, hand sanitizer was sold out, like everything was sold out. And I went to get some Kleenex, and the entire Kleenex, everything, like I took photographs of it, everything was gone. And then, I went all the almost all the bread, fresh produce, like people are acting like it's the apocalypse. It's unbelievable.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? Like just the way that they're pushing this.
Yeah, I mean, I insofar as I can tell right now, I mean, it's hard to know these things for certain exactly what's going on. My guess, of course, is that it's not nearly what they're making. It's what I can tell you this. Whatever they're saying it is, it's not that, right? But the way they're going to play it, I think mandatory vaccinations and the takeover of the CDC or the ability of the government to control people through medical scares is certainly, there's the Overton window for you.
Yeah, and a lot of this stuff, it does directly relate to what we're talking about tonight, because I mean there are certain Saturnian energies involved with this whole idea that they're pushing with this. So it's not really off topic. Yeah, it's not really off topic. So, but it is in the forefront of everyone's minds right now. So I think it is important that we do address that. I don't really honestly think people need to be as worried and, stuff as what the media is really portraying them to be. I really don't see that going on in the area I live. Like, I don't see people out in mass hysteria trying to buy up face masks and, sanitizer and all that stuff the way that they're portraying on the TV. And in fact, I saw a little clip from somebody that showed how I think it was like a cell phone camera or something that showed how a news crew was actually taking stuff off of the shelves in the supermarket to film the empty shelves to try and generate this mass panic. So I mean, I can
tell you that personally at the store that I was at, it was empty shelves and they were sold out of those items. I'll look at the photograph right here. No masks, no hand sanitizer, no alcohol. So all the like rubbing alcohol and witch hazel. And I can confirm that firsthand. And I'm friends with the pharmacist there, and he said it's bananas, right? He couldn't believe it. So, whatever the news crews are doing to increase the level of fear, it's sort of one of those self-fulfilling prophecies. We used to have the old joke, right, where they went on the news and said that there was going to be a shortage of toilet paper. And so in response to that, everybody went out and bought toilet paper, thus creating a shortage of toilet paper. And it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. There's going to be a shortage of
my album, so buy my album.
There you go. We're not going to. We can't get a run on it. We can't get another pressing. So you better get it now.
There's only 900 left.
Right?
My books are in short supply, guys.
Exactly. So whatever the case may be, there people are that the news is faking it in some cases. I can say that here in Seattle, where there have been a couple of reported deaths. I'm not going to say actually, but reported deaths. People are literally going cuckoo. We have a large Asian population here, and
that might be why.
Yeah, they're used to wearing the masks and that sort of thing. So, and it's interesting that the WHO came out and said that they don't recommend wearing masks. Because there's no proven efficacy, and there's other medical reports saying lack of proving of efficacy does not equate to there not being any efficacy. It's just so many conflicting reports, right? It just seems that for certain one thing that's happening is that they're creating confusion. Right. Now that is one thing for certain, is that there is confusion being created, and that is definitely a Saturn thing.
Oh yeah, the chaos.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Because you got to have order out of chaos, right?
John Flaherty, thank you so much for the $10 super chat. Good to see you here, my friend. I hope you're having an awesome day as always. I'm sure
John's
we'll
ace, man. He's a good guy.
John's a great dude.
Yeah, man.
Right. Did I catch up on the super chats before we go further in the Saturn thing? Let me make sure, because I try so hard to do that right. All right. By the way, if you guys have questions, by all means, put them in the chat. If I don't see them, my apologies. I try to follow it, but it's hard. I jump between there and D Live, and today I've got notes I've got to follow too because of the depth of the information we're going to be covering. So I'll try to get to questions if they are coming up. Oh, yes. If anyone's uncertain, that is a screenshot I took of Wayne smiling earlier so that we can at least show him. As a matter of fact, Baldini, if you want to send me your little icon, I'd be happy to put that up as well.
Oh, sure.
And then we can have you on screen, too, and then everyone just gets to stare at my David Gilmour going on here. But
all right.
So we need
not
a
everybody knows who that is.
icon.
David Gilmour is the lead guitarist for Pink Floyd. All right.
There you go, showing your age again.
I know. I just want to make sure. I wonder how many people actually do know that, and they're like, don't be an ass, Jason.
I used to say I was dating myself, and then people thought that was like literally going out on a date with myself.
Thing
like,
now.
What? No.
Like No. This is a thing with crazy people in Hollywood, that they're in relationships with themselves. I forget what stupid term they have for it, but
self-attached or something like that.
I'm self-centered. Does that count?
Hollywood ass.
Oh dear.
Unbelievable. All right.
Okay, let's see here. I want to take this too.
All right, if you want to kick that over to me, Baldini, I'll put that up in a second. But I'm going to move on with the point here because we're already half an hour into the show, and good grief, that flew by. I guess we're goofing off too much. All right, so we're going to start with the Greek, even though it's not necessarily going to be the oldest, but it's the easiest one and the stuff that most people are going to be familiar with. In Greek mythology, Cronus was the leader and youngest of the first generation of the Titans, the divine descendants of Uranus, the sky, and Gaia, the earth. There are some variations on the background story, however, but we're not going to go into those because we've done plenty of that with Crow, and you can find that stuff on your own. Kronos overthrew his father and ruled during the mythological Golden Age, and the Golden Age is something you'll see referenced a lot when it comes to Saturn, by the way, until he was overthrown by his own son Zeus and imprisoned in Tartarus. Kronos was usually depicted with a harp, scythe, or a sickle, which was the instrument he used to castrate and depose Uranus, his father. In Athens, on the 12th day of the Attic month of Hecatombeon, a festival called Cronia was held in honor of Cronus to celebrate the harvest, suggesting that, as a result of his association with the virtuous Golden Age, Cronus continued to preside as a patron of the harvest. Cronus was also identified in classical antiquity with the Roman deity Saturn, which will be coming next. All right, gentlemen, anybody want to make comments on that?
Yeah.
Just that the secrets of Saturn and Crow knows. So.
See what you did there.
Yeah, okay. Sorry. Go ahead, Wayne. With something serious.
Okay. I'll have to make it something serious then. Anyway, you can look and see how Cronus is associated with the harvest. Once again, this all ties to the sky clock and the timing of the seasons in this world we live in. So you could see how this relates to different aspects of nature. And once again, this is basically one of the things that Saturn relates to is different aspects of nature. And now some people would argue that Cronus and Saturn, the ideas behind them are completely different from one another, but they have been tied together through the Roman mythology. And as we've discussed before on the Crow 777 show, these mythologies, especially your Greek mythology and the Romanized version of it, are the most important ones that we need to understand in the day and age we're in, because these are the ones that the power structure utilizes the most in order to implement their different agendas. So that's why it's important that we look at this stuff. But you can see how it ties directly to the sky clock and the harvest idea. And there's a lot behind this whole harvest idea. This could actually relate also back to biblical ideas, like in the book of Revelation, too. So you could see how all these things kind of move forward through time, and the archetype is there. The underlying archetype is there for a lot of this stuff, and this relates back to the whole Cronus idea. Cronus is also known as Father Time, and that's kind of one of the limiting aspects of our reality that we have is time. Time is a valuable commodity, and we have a lot of different time constraints in our reality. We only have so many years here in this place in order to figure it all out. So when you look at that, it's kind of a limiting factor that is put upon us, and this is a Saturnian energy, okay? This limiting factor that's put on us. So if you view the passing of time as this limiting factor, this is a Saturnian type energy. The Chronos energy, the Chronos factor of it all. We only have a short amount of time here in this world, and it's very cyclical. So this relates to cycles of time. So even it could be even construed that the number 0, the symbol of the number 0, could be a symbol associated with Saturn, because this is an all-containing loop. I mean, this represents time, the loop of time, like all-encompassing of time, and we exist within that time space. So this is one of the limiting factors there, and that's one of many symbols that represent Saturn in different ways that could be used for different things. So when you see the number 0, you could think of Saturn, especially when you see the number 0, when it's the circle that has the little line going through it. If you see 0 represented that way, that's Saturn. So you could keep that in mind as well.
Also the Ouroboros.
Right. Absolutely, Baldini, the Ouroboros. the snake eating its tail, that also is a representation of Saturn. That's a symbol representing Saturn and this cyclical nature of time and how we're constrained within it and how it repeats itself.
What I what I was not aware of until today, doing some additional research on Saturn imagery and symbology, I was unaware that the middle finger is called the finger of Saturn.
There's one I didn't know.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. So according to palmists,
like what's the shtick?
Well, according to palmists and those who are palm readers, going all the way back to Indian palmistry, they call it the Madhyama, and the mount of Saturn is found at the base of the finger. So the index finger is the Apollo finger, and the middle finger is the Saturn finger, and they draw all kinds of symbology in there about its length and its relation and ratio to the hand. But there is a whole bunch of information about it being called the finger of Saturn. So when you give somebody the middle finger, that's literally a representation of Saturn.
Saying go ring yourself?
That's the nice way to put it, I guess.
Yeah. So, but I did not know that in palmistry they relate each of the fingers. They have the Jupiter finger, the Saturn finger, the Apollo finger, and Saturn is of course longer than all the others, so it occupies a position of superiority.
Cool.
Yeah, that's something I was unaware of. I need to look into palmistry a little more. I did not know that different planets were associated with different fingers. That's an interesting concept in itself. Yeah, that's something that we might have to look a little more into, because you can make a lot of different inferences that way. Yeah, Marty would probably know a lot about that, I would think. He seems pretty on top of stuff like that.
Yeah, palmistry is an ancient art and something that I haven't spent a lot of time on, although it's interesting to me, and that I think that there is a there. Like most things of this nature, I don't put an enormous amount of weight in it in terms of centering my life around it. But again, on the other side of this, people wouldn't have been doing it for thousands of years if there wasn't something to it. So I do suspect that there is a there, but there's a lot of inferences made from palmistry, some of it which is pretty interesting. But that is one that I did not know again until today, is that they relate each of the fingers to these gods or to the planets, and that the Saturn finger is the middle finger. So interesting corollary.
All right, let's get on to the Romans. Saturn, or Saturnus, was a major Roman god of agriculture, the harvest, liberation, and time. He held a sickle or a scythe in his left hand and a bundle of wheat in his right. His mother's name was Helen, or Hel, Hel. Seems to be some parallels with that, actually, with some of the Norse stuff. Saturn's reign was depicted as a golden age, once again, of peace and harmony, associating him as a god of wealth. The temple of Saturn in the Roman Forum is said to have housed the state treasury. In memory of the Golden Age, the Feast of Saturnalia was held every year during the time of the winter solstice. At this time, no war could be declared, slaves and masters ate at the same table, executions were postponed, and gifts were exchanged. That sounds a bit familiar, I'm sure, to just about everyone. Under Saturn's rule, humans enjoyed the spontaneous bounty of the earth without labor in a state of social equality. The revelries of Saturnalia were supposed to reflect the conditions of a temporary release from civilized constraint. Christians adopted aspects of the feast and renamed it Christmas. The Romans identified Saturn with the Greek Cronus, whose myths were adapted. In particular, Cronus's role in the genealogy of the Greek gods was transferred to Saturn. Two consorts represented different aspects of Saturn. The name of his wife Ops, the Roman equivalent of the Greek Rhea, means wealth, abundance, and resources. Then is also his association with Lua, which means destruction and dissolution, a goddess who received the bloodied weapons of enemies destroyed in war. So you see that whole dichotomy thing, good, bad, all that kind of thing, balance. But gentlemen, Take it away.
So did I hear you? Did I hear properly that you said that Saturnalia was representative of a time where they kind of threw off their bounds of standard behavior and kind of let their hair down a little bit? Is that what I got there?
That is totally true.
Kind of like Mardi Gras. So it's a
kind of like Mardi Gras.
Okay. I wanted to make sure I had that correct. So then the giving of gifts and that sort of thing developed out of it. So sure, Saturn Claus. Got it. Okay.
Saturn Claus. Yes, that is indeed the Saturn Claus right there. So yeah, that's when you look back. A lot of these different aspects of the Christmas holiday season that we as Christians celebrate are derived directly from a lot of these older religious or mythological ideas, the Saturnalia, that kind of thing. This is where most of the traditions that we celebrate today come from.
Sure, the Yule log, the Christmas tree, the candles on the tree, all of that is directly derived from a series of say pagan. That's kind of a word that the Catholic Church trotted out to denigrate people, but from these different ancient traditions that were more these polytheism, right? It's sort of based on these older gods and these older ideas. So it's odd how they both make it a pariah, but also ingest it, right? And kind of put their Christian overlay on it, like they did with most things. The Catholic Church it's a very interesting dichotomy that they've used.
It sure is, and the Catholic Church, and particularly the Vatican, has done this with so many different things, and they've adopted all of these quote unquote pagan ideas. That's a loaded word, by the way.
Yeah.
Pagan.
Yes. I know that's what I was trying to kind of stay away from. Right, it's like that's the word that they chose, but it is used as an epithet, which is unfortunate.
Right, it is something that didn't really have any kind of a derogatory nature behind it, and they put a derogatory nature behind it, and that's not necessarily right, but especially considering that they poured it over all these different kind of ideas and concepts into the Catholic religion and rolled it all together into the Catholic religion, and this is carried through all different aspects of the Christian faith, like all the different denominations of the Christian faith. So.
Well, much of it. I mean, that's a different conversation. But I find that Christianity is presented in Western Christian culture is very far removed from the teachings of Jesus. And I find that one of his primary messages was that, hey, you don't need anybody to come between you and your Creator. And everybody said, hey, it's a great idea. Let's make a religion out of it.
And make sure you go to church and give your money every week.
Right, and then let's get a priest.
Confess your sins to the preacher.
Exactly. So that's a very different conversation to have, but it is a fascinating topic that it is from again, this is nothing against any Catholics in particular, but if you look at the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church, and the way that it's set up, it is exactly diametrically opposed from everything from everything that was taught from Jesus, right? So it's a very it's a very sinister thing. So it's there is few other things that I've seen that are as direct one-to-one corollary with Luciferian teachings, and yet it's Luciferian but calls itself Christian. It's mind-boggling. So again, not to take on anybody's belief system or religion, but if you look at it from a objective perspective, you can't help but see the corollaries there.
Oh, definitely. I agree with you 100%. And I do consider myself a Christian. So, I mean, and this is something that a lot of Christians take issue with, but you have to, when you're presented with these facts, this is where a lot of this stuff came from. You have to understand ancient peoples, before the rise of Christianity itself, there were a lot of different concepts and stuff that were presented to early mankind. And these were their images of God and such, and the way worship worked. these were all ideas that carried forward through many different traditions. And when you go back and you look at the advent of Christianity, how that all came about and stuff, if you look at just purely from the standpoint of the teachings of Jesus, a lot of this stuff that we have carried forward into the modern age with what you said, like with Western Christianity and stuff, it just doesn't add up to like what Jesus had really taught. Sure. And it's become more of a control system than anything. So that's what's really behind any organized religion, in my view.
Pretty much, and you know, when you put it into cultural context, right, is that when the Romans got a hold of it, right, they turned it into a into a like a senate, right? So it became that, and then as you move forward, every culture kind of takes a hold of it and turns it into something else. So you got the Romans turned it into a senate. And when you come into Western culture, we turn it into a business, right? And so you end up with televangelists, right? So it becomes culturalized and just a new form laid on top of it, and again totally ignores what the original teachings were. Again, not to get sidetracked, but one of the things that I see directly in the Saturn iconography from start to finish is that I do draw a direct corollary between Saturn and Santa and Satan, if you want to call that, the Luciferian thing. There does seem to be direct one-to-one corollaries throughout. And so the way that the Saturn mythos is told does seem to be sort of the Prometheus tale. Again, it's told many, many ways of the turned upside down story of I brought you wisdom and knowledge, and I got in trouble for that, right? So that's the upside down story, the way that I see it. So, but as I look at the Saturn symbology, especially with the black cube of Saturn, you can directly one-to-one correlate that with the black cube of Muslims. I have a brain slip. What's that called? There you go.
The Kaaba stone.
Exactly. So, but then you take the six-sided star of Judaism and unfold it, and it's exactly the same thing, right? So, as well as the cap and mortar, you have all of these things that are directly correlated to one another, and they just simply, it's an overlay that they lay on top of it.
Absolutely. It's all the same, only the names are changed.
Only, right, to protect the not innocent, right? Exactly.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where there are a lot of direct corollaries between all these different mythical iconographies. Like you said, you related it back to the whole concept of Satan, or that kind of thing, or the Promethean tale, and it all equates together, the whole Saturnian thing. And you could even trace this back, even in the Bible. There's a lot of different correlations between Saturn and even Prometheus, whatever you want to call it. I mean, like all of these things, all these mythologies basically are telling the same tales. But in the Bible, you could tie all this back to a guy named Nimrod. Right. Even the name of Saturn's wife in the Greek there, Rhea. Her name was Rhea. Nimrod's wife was named Rhea too, and also additionally to that, if people want to actually look at this, because this is like, if you're really interested in the old myths and how they tie to biblical studies or things like that, if you look back at the story of Nimrod and Rhea, Nimrod was also called Baal Hazor, or the Lord of Fortresses. So, and this relates directly to the idea that he built cities with massive walls around them. And this was the very beginnings of our modern civilization. These were the very first cities and city-states. So, like, all this stuff all relates back, and this ties back. This is the guy that actually was directly responsible for organizing the people to build the Tower of Babel, too, in the biblical story. So, like, all these things relate together. It's interesting how a lot of it ties back to this Saturnian idea, or these Saturnian energies per se.
And I think you can relate Nimrod to Gilgamesh as well. I think that it's all pretty corollary.
Oh yeah, I agree with you 100%.
You know what? I think we're gonna have to do a part 2 to this, because we aren't getting anywhere on the notes, and we haven't even barely scratched the surface here. But that's all right. That's all right. We're delivering information, and hopefully everybody is enjoying the conversation. I definitely see a whole bunch of chatting going on. But let's move on to our next mythological figure that's actually older, I do believe, than any of the Greek or the Roman characters, and that is the character of El. El. El is the equivalent to the Hurrian god Kumarbi and the Greek god Cronus. He was the chief deity of the West Semites of ancient Near East and Northeast Africa. The ancient Semitic religion, including Canaanite religion, was strongly influenced by Mesopotamian and Egyptian mythology. So those go back even further. And do keep in mind, by the way, I probably should have said this right off the bat, that this is all being pulled from mainstream sources, and then I just try and cross-reference them to make sure that the information's correlating to whatever's available. It could be totally wrong. It could be all bullshit and made-up lies. I have no idea. But as Crow and I always say, we just do the best we can with what we've got to work with, and this is what I'm presenting to you in the best manner possible. But anyway,
sure. I get some similar research, right? That's directly relating the Baal Haman, right? Carthaginian, they're calling it to Yahweh, and they're saying it's the same guy.
Well, I'm about
right?
to get there, actually.
Yeah, and then the Old Testament would differ with that directly, right? So it's interesting how they put different sources will represent them differently. Anyway, go ahead.
This can mean that the ancient origins of Judaism could come from El, and that's what you basically just said. El was usually portrayed as an elderly man with wings and a long beard. He was known as Toru El, or the Bull El, or the Bull God. The bull was symbolic of El, as well as Baal Hadad, the son of the Dagon god, or the fish god, the Pope's hat, by the way, the mitre, and they wore bull horns on their headdresses. This can also tie in with the constellation Taurus, the bull, of course. Assumedly, these events were taking place in the age of Taurus, and I didn't completely break these down, but these different ages did seem to correlate to their gods differently. And it's, of course, interesting to note that the further back in time you go, you get to the age of Leo, and that is listed in numerous sources as the Golden Age. So is this the Golden Age of Saturn that they were talking about under the age of Leo? I don't know, and I don't know how we'd prove that. Perhaps one of you gentlemen have something to chime in about that, but let me get through the rest of this point first.
Sure.
Continuing to the Canaanites, El appears to have been the supreme god, the creator of all creatures, father of mankind, and the head of the pantheon, the grand poobah, as it were. He was called creator, possessor of heaven and earth, the highest judge and authority in all divine matters and human affairs. His sons, Hadab, Yam, and Mot, each share similar attributes to the Greco-Roman gods, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, respectively. El is continually identified with the god Yahweh. In the Bible, it is Yahweh who delivered Israel from Egypt and gave Moses the Ten Commandments. Yahweh revealed himself to Israel as the Lord, prohibiting idols and the worship of other gods. It seems a strong likelihood that the God of the Jews had evolved from the Canaanite El. Again, that's just conjecture, but it does seem to be as the, well, however much time, centuries, I guess we could say, wore on, things just sort of transferred one to the next. But, all right, who wants to run with it?
Oh, man, this is just going to be like just running with scissors. There's a lot to go with here.
I'm going to fumble,
That. That's bad.
Yeah, El is basically when you go back and you look through like philosophy, and if you look back at the Christian sources and stuff, El is basically a title that they give for God. It's synonymous with like the word Lord. So it's one of those things where it's a very short word, first of all, and I think the reason for this is because I think there's something original to the idea. Like it's like one of the original words for God within all languages. Because it's basically a primary sound, and this relates back to the whole idea of there being a single language back in ancient antiquity. So when you look at that, And like you said, this is kind of one of the stories that predates most of the other mythologies and stuff like that. It all relates to the same basic figure or figures moving forward with just a different twist on it. But I think there's something just kind of primordial about the name El. It just seems to me there might be something to that as being like a tie to original language of some sort. And that's just a feeling I get. I mean, I have nothing to back that. That's total conjecture. But I've studied Christian theology pretty in depth, and it always goes back. There's a couple different terms that are used frequently throughout the Bible and a lot of the biblical accounts and stuff to describe God, and El is one of those terms. El, also like El Shaddai, it's a descriptive term. So it's one of those things where it could tie back, rightly so, to the whole Saturnian idea again. And that's not to say like all the Saturnian energies and ideas are bad or good. You know what I mean? There's that duality there. And that's the thing that gets confusing when you go back and look at some of these ideas through the lens of time, just looking back at these different stories and seeing these different aspects of things. But is it a common source? I think it is. Now, was it twisted and misconstrued in a lot of ways and taken a lot of different directions through different religious ideologies and mythologies? I think that's also the case, too. And I think this also ties directly back to the whole confusing of languages described in the whole Tower of Babel story. I think there may have actually been something to that. I think there was an original language. I see evidence of that. What exactly that language was, who knows? I can't say. But it seems to me that when you follow this stuff back to some of the earliest sources you could find, you come across more simplified words and terms like the term El, defining God. So, like, it looks to me like this could be one of the earliest accounts that we have of these different Saturnian principles.
Yeah, so I agree with you. You said, Wayne, that you could kind of only go on your feeling. There is a substantial amount of documentation that points to not only there being a singular or a source language from which most of even modern language comes, but certainly the ancient languages all seem to have a singular source and use the etymologies often go together. El definitely does come out as being a word of not just a title, but usually spoken in reverence or associated with a deity. So where you could say Lord might be something you might term a king. El was typically reserved for some sort of supernatural or deity. But it is difficult to know, and I think this is one of those things where people kind of have to use their own discernment, because there's a lot of stories told from about a variety of different angles, right? It does appear from the research that I've done that there are stories going, from the original creation stories, if you want to say that, or origin stories that combine or are corollary to one another that many people would say predate the Genesis story, is written by presumably Moses or whoever you want to assign that to, but understand that was written later. Most of these were oral traditions going way back. And for a long time, oral traditions were considered sacred to the point that they were not allowed to be written down. And so you're going to find that these stories and traditions go way back, and at some point, they're going to get a little bit mangled, a little bit tortured, and somebody's going to take credit for it. So when you get into the idea of syncretism and that one predated the other, or that they're all the same thing, I look at it a little bit differently. And certainly, if there is an attempt by someone to take credit where credit's not due, let's put it that way, or if the story has any merit to it of the Saturn or a Luciferian or Set character, whichever one that you want to go with there, who makes it his goal to usurp or overthrow the Most High and take his place, it certainly would stand to reason that he would try to take that name El for himself. right? So Baal as well. So there's so many different interpretations of it, and so many academics are going to take such different takes on it and claim to be right, that I think that it's going to be difficult to stick your fork in the ground and say this is absolutely true. There's so much different evidence from so many different angles that again, this is where sort of discernment comes in. You have to sort of decide for yourself based upon the preponderance of evidence where you're going to land on this, right? And from my perspective, I usually come down with a very solid, I'm not really sure. Right? It's because it's difficult to prove. That may seem wishy-washy, but I always stay open to new information, and I have the way that I read it right now, the way that it looks and feels right to me, based again upon the preponderance of evidence. But I would have a difficult position trying to convince anybody of those views. I always try to just explain rather than convince or coerce, because I think other people are going to take it the way they want. But I do. You're absolutely right in that El comes off as a title. It's been long done in the Hebrew tradition that El Shaddai and these other names are given to him as different aspects of the character of the Creator, and the same El has been used in a variety of different traditions. So again, this one of them is going to relate to Saturn as well.
I actually have a note for that. That's my last point on El, to kind of tie up everything you guys just threw out there. In Northwest Semitic use, El was both a generic word for any god and the special name or title of a particular god who was distinguished from other gods as being the god, quote unquote. El is listed at the head of many pantheons. In some Canaanite and Ugaritic sources, El played a role as father of the gods or of creation. So the basic breakdown of that is, I think it may have originally been a singular entity, and then it got used,
borrowed.
It over time I think it got broken down and used in other ways. For instance, how many names of angels end in L, and I mean, we could rattle off a zillion things with that. So that's just something to consider
right?
there.
Yep. Yeah, and even in fact, you can use like electricity, right? Elemental. These things.
Yeah, any of that. Elevate or elevate,
right.
Election, like all these things.
All
words have
relate
meaning,
to
as
it.
we always say.
They do have meaning, and the the roots of those words definitely have a foundation in, again, if you look at it really closely, as something related to or created by, God, if you want to put it that way. So, but my position is that the further back you can find solid evidence for, the closer you're going to get to the truth.
All right, Saturn in Hebrew, and here we're going to start getting into some other stuff that a lot of folks kind of seem to skip over. If I'm going to pronounce this right, I can't say I'm great at Hebrew. Shabbatai, meaning
Shabbat,
Shabbat, or Sabbath. All those things coincide, Sabbath and all that. So the meaning is the restful one, whose name is parallel to that of the Sabbath day. The seventh day, the day of rest. Esoterically, Saturn embodies time. In the midst of time's passage, Saturn remains still and silent, drawing all endeavors to a close. And remember, this is coming from a rabbinical point of view, meaning ancient Judaism.
Right, and a lot of the rabbinical ideas are directly derived from Saturnian ideas as well. You could see that. I mean, just looking through a lot of the literature. And once again, it embodies time itself. This is what it's talking about, the passage of time. This is one of the constraining aspects of our reality is time. And, it says Saturn remains still and silent, drawing all endeavors to a close. And that tells you that all things in this world have an end. So, even if there's a golden age, or if there's an age like we're living in now where it's turbulent times, there will be an end to these things. All these things will see their end. And, a new cycle will start. So, when you look at that's the Saturnian idea, and it's been ported over into rabbinical teachings as well. So this moves forward into Judaism and different aspects of Judaism. And one of the main ones that really crosses over with this, that really kind of pulls forward a lot more of the Saturnian ideas, is the Kabbalah ideas, the Kabbalistic ideas, because the Judaistic Kabbalah is a whole different thing in and of itself from what much of the religion is considered to be. And a lot of people in positions of power in this world, and people that are quote unquote famous or whatever you want to call them, they study the Kabbalah and the Jewish Kabbalah. So this is something that imparts a lot of different information carried over from an earlier time, and in a lot of ways it misuses this information in a lot of the same ways like that the alchemical ideas are misused, and we can see this all around us. But I think that's why it's kind of important that we look at these ideas with an open mind and understand that it's the intent that's put behind utilizing these ideas that's the important part, because some of these things in and of themselves aren't necessarily a bad thing and could be used for a lot of good, but by and large, the ones that know about these ideas and utilize them in the world today do not have good intention for the vast majority of the population. So that's why I think it now more than ever, it's important to look at this stuff and kind of bring it to the forefront of thought rather than let it reside within these secretive groups and these secret societies that exist.
All right. Let's take a moment to start discussing Saturn's golden age. And this is the age that man later called the age of Kronos, or Saturn, of course, and was remembered with nostalgia as an age of bliss. References to the age of Kronos in the ancient lore are very numerous, and I've got several of them I'm going to break down here shortly. Does anyone have any comments they want to make on that, or do you want me to move forward?
Go ahead. Go ahead and move forward.
Hesiod tells of a golden race of mortal men who lived in the time of Kronos when he was reigning in heaven, and they lived like gods, without sorrow of heart, remote and free from toil. Miserable age rested not on them. The fruitful earth unforced bear them fruit abundantly and without stint. They dwelt in ease and peace upon their lands with many good things. So, I don't know when these people were writing, if they were recounting a mythological time or if indeed there were some sort of evidence left behind that suggested that these things really occurred. But go ahead, whoever wants to take it.
Now, this is your archetype of the Garden of Eden right here. This is what this is. The age of innocence, the golden age, the age where resources were plenty and man didn't have to work to get these resources. He didn't have to work the earth to get his food. This is a time before what they would term the fall of man and the idea of sin. So, like this from a Christian theological point of view, is the time of the Garden of Eden. Okay, the paradise where there was no toil or work or no sorrow of heart, anything like that. This was a true golden age, a true paradise, an age of innocence. But this was also a time when man didn't have a lot of the quote unquote knowledge or primordial knowing. And this is going back to mystery school ideas, okay? Because this is what they're talking about. This is before man actually had an original thought. And this is the way that they frame it within the mystery school ideologies. So this is a time when man just existed as another animal on the earth. Didn't really have consciousness per se. Didn't have the consciousness that we think of and see today. Didn't have the divine spark. Now, was this an actual time that existed? I don't know. I mean, no one could really say for sure. Is it more allegory? It's very possible. It could be something that's more allegorical than based on any type of evidence of fact, because this is not something we could prove or disprove outright. So it's one of those things that you take it upon faith to think that there was a time before man had this divine spark or consciousness. Now, is that so? I don't know, because it's hard to say. The evidence we see before us today would indicate that without this consciousness or divine spark, there really would be nothing. There would be nothing. Like, this physical existence would not be here based upon just different hermetic ideas and stuff that we see. We wouldn't really understand the reality we live in. It wouldn't be. It's one of those things. It's really hard to describe in words what we're talking about here. This would be like a state of existence that's really kind of a non-existence in a way, because nothing would change. There would be no change, indicating that there's no sorrow of heart and no toil or anything like that. Indicates that this is a realm that exists outside the bounds of time, or outside the Saturnian energy. So this is a concept that's really hard for us to grasp, because this is the only state we've ever existed in here, is in these constraints of time. And to understand a place or an idea that's not bound by these constraints of time, it's really kind of hard to wrap your brain around. So that's one of those things where, could this be why the idea of Kronos or Saturn is tied directly to time? Because this golden age existed when Saturn ruled, but when Saturn fell from rule and Zeus took over the reins, then time became a restraining factor, and mankind was bound by this idea. I don't know. These are all things we really need to ponder. But, I mean, these are the type of Saturnian ideas that are out there. And these are the kind of things that are taught within the mystery school ideologies and the framework of the secret societies and stuff. And, how they directly tie back to different theologies and, like, Christian religion, Christian theology, all the different mythologies and different of the major religions within the world. They all have some type of these different ideas or archetypes, and it all relates back to a very similar thing. And I think, once again, this is one of those things where it relates back to an original idea, but time, the distance, the constraints of time and distance have made it impossible for us to really parse out the root of where all this stuff came from, or all these ideas or archetypes came from. So it's one of those things where we just ponder about it, but at the same time, we have to acknowledge that in the day and age we're in, we're bound by these constraints of time, whereas there may have existed a quote-unquote age that did not have these constraints of time upon it. So that's, that ties back to the idea of living longer lifespans back in ancient times, and, the actual idea of immortality before the fall of man. So when you look at it from that vantage point, I mean, you could see how the Saturnian archetype just kind of envelops this whole thing. It's all bound in the idea of time and existing within time or outside of time. So it's an interesting thing to wrap your brain around.
Can I present a different viewpoint?
Absolutely. That's why we're here, man.
Okay. So relating the idea back to, so we have the Saturnian mons, or the golden age, right, of Saturn. And you related that to the time of, in the Garden of Eden, kind of relating it to that before there was, toil and sadness, that sort of stuff. And so, but also with the idea without the divine spark, and that man was not much more than a beast without the divine spark. And again, this goes back to the idea of that Prometheus brought the spark of fire to give to man the spark of intelligence, and that's what he took. And to me, this relates directly to the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And to me, that's why it becomes sort of a deception. And where I relate the golden age to is probably, again, just a different reading of perhaps some of the same information, but probably what I would term the antediluvian age, which is post what the Genesis fall, post Genesis 3, where the fall is, but prior to the flood. So this would have been an age entirely ruled by, this would be in the book of Enoch, the incursion of the Watchers, where the sons of God came in and had relations with women, and had what we would call either the Anunnaki or the Nephilim, right? And they were. This would be considered by Saturn, Kronos, if he is indeed the same character and same personality, this would be considered to him a golden age in which everything there was what we would consider now magic, right? Was everything worked really well because again it was in the post or the pre-flood world where things got really broken really badly, and so for that character that would have been a golden age where he ruled without restraint and was able to manifest without any real veil that we see now. So it is easy to see that the construct and how that story would be related or told in a mystery school, that mankind had no creativity, he had no self-awareness or was not an individual before being given that with the, what we would call the forbidden fruit or the tree of knowledge of good and evil. But again, I see that as part of a different way of telling the tale, but that golden age would have been that period. Again, antediluvian, where he ruled without restraint, and then. But I do think that part of time is accurate. That if we perceive the material limits of mankind, that man is kind of, as C.S. Lewis called it, sort of, he's part beast and part spirit, right? And that we're bound within the limits of the fourth dimension of time. That these spirit beings would not be bound by it, except that when you again, if you go back to the Enochian writings, that sort of thing, that they were cast down out of heaven. There was no place found for him in heaven anymore, so he was cast to the earth, and he became then limited by time and perceived himself as to be the lord and master of it, of this domain. So he would be master of time. So I mean, again, it's a different look at the same story, but. Again, just I guess to say that there are different ways of looking at the same things, but that's a little bit different how I see it versus what the mystery schools teach, because from my perspective, they're always going to take an antagonistic view toward the creator.
Absolutely, and that all ties into the dualistic nature of things, and once again, the relating of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, because that's when dualism and duality was first introduced into the creation, was with the eating of the fruit from the tree of knowledge and good and evil. And exactly. This is an allegory, but I mean, this denotes to you, up until that point, man, whatever he was at that point, had no concept of duality. He was only, a self-absorbed being. He didn't understand, the way that this system operates. And once again, this is another thing that ties back to the constraints of time. Duality is also a constraint of the whole time narrative or the whole Saturnian idea. Duality, because we cannot exist without this duality. The world would not operate how it does, because you have to have opposites in order for there to actually be anything to manifest. So because you can't have darkness without light. You would not know one from the other. So these things are, inherently dualistic by nature. And the mystery schools, the way they teach it, like you said, it really is antagonistic of anything, that I would term as Christian teaching or anything, or Christian theological thinking. It's very antagonistic of that, but it's done like that on purpose. And it's not to say that these ideas don't have merit, because they do have some merit to them, but it's just a matter of, interpretation, how you see it, and sure. Where you fall on that line. And
no lie would be believable if it didn't have some portion of truth. Some
kernel of truth, right.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
But as I often say, right, a gallon of water and a drop of poison is still poison, right? So,
yep.
Right. So again, this is where, good discernment comes in. So again, I leave it to everybody to kind of figure it out on their own. All I can do is, try to shed some light on it. And again, I land always in a place of, I'm not really sure. Right? I don't know. I have ideas and I have suspicions and hypothesis and I have a way that I see it. But far be it for me to stick to stick the fork down and say, this is it. Right. This is absolutely truth, because I don't know.
Right. And I'm the same place as you. I don't know what the absolute truth is, but I think it's important just to let people know what it is that these people in positions of power, what it is that they believe, and they're taught through these mystery school teachings and through these secret societies.
Yeah, there is a lot to be discovered there. For absolutely. Because if you understand what they believe, right, it helps shed light on what's going on, right? So, because I can certainly say that when I try to explain some of the stuff to people, they go, "Oh, that's crazy," and I go, "You know what? It's not what I believe; it's what they believe, right?" And that's empirically proven. So it doesn't matter what I think. What's happening is a result of what they think, because I don't have any real influence or control of what happens in the world, but they certainly do, and this is what they believe. So when it comes into the cybernetics or the transgender or any of these things, it's certainly happening, and it's not a matter of that I'm making it up. It's a matter of it's out there, and here's why: is because they believe it. Right?
And here's the occult ancient information that they use to bring these things about, and why they're bringing them about.
Exactly.
And that's why I think is an important mandate for me to expose this stuff to people, so that they could see, okay, well, this is what's going on. This is why it's going on, because the people that are in charge of it believe X, Y, Z. I don't necessarily agree with any of these mystery school teachings. Like I said, there is some value to be derived from them, because there is that kernel of truth in there that you could pick out of these things. But at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, like these ideas and concepts are being used against the public at large. And that's I stand on the opposite side of that. I want people to be aware this is going on and understand exactly how they're being manipulated and where this stuff comes from, and why they do the things they do. And if they have a better understanding of that, if you know your enemy and understand your enemy, you don't walk onto a battlefield without a game plan, without knowing who your enemy is or what his tactics are.
Yep, know your enemy, that's for sure.
Unless you're Disney writing the new Star Wars trilogy. Ha!
Oh, gosh, right.
Then you don't give a crap about making money, that's for sure.
Right. A couple of things from chat. Seven Ravenwolf asked about my moniker, that logo. No, actually, I did that several years before the John Lennon bus ever came out. So, if anything, he copied me. And then Eric DeLion asked,
Baldini, what are you
before
doing
the show,
copying my logo? That's not
my
very
logo?
nice.
It's not nice at all.
I'm going to sick Ringo on you.
I'll sue you. And then Eric DeLion asked about the Awakening project that I'm working on. Yeah, we can touch on that before the end. So was supposed to have a podcast uploaded last Sunday, and I had some technical issues. I had some clips in there that YouTube decided they didn't want me to upload, so I'm having to rebuild the whole thing. It's really a pain in the butt. But that really
difficulties. Please
technical difficulties. Please stand by. So I apologize for that. I'm trying to get it done this week, and I just have just a major buttload of stuff to do at my work for money. So that's kind of keeping me tight on that. But we'll try to get it up again, see if I can get it done by this weekend, just to have to re-edit everything from the start, and it's over an hour long. But really, most of your questions will be answered there in terms of what's happening. It's still ongoing, and if people want to continue to send information, I'm still gathering stuff from there. Now there's over 200 people that are involved, and we probably will get even more. There's again, don't want to get too deep into it right now, because I want all the information laid out. Right now I'm working on it as a double-blind study, and so if I really release all the information, it won't be that. But there's a couple of things that I can share with you, which I found really interesting. Is that one, all the stories that came in are great. Like some of them just really touched me. One of the things that was unexpected, I probably should have gathered it. I should have anticipated it, but I didn't. Is that one of the factors that we see over and over again with people waking up is that somehow they ended up with time to do it. It requires an immense amount of time to really dig into it and study. And so whether that became being injured in some way and not working, or they lost a job, or there was a major life change, or something caused them to spend time on it, that seems to be a primary factor with a large number of people, is that they found themselves suddenly with time or the interest to spend time looking into these things, and that made a profound difference for many people. So that's one aspect, but definitely stay tuned for that. I can, before we get done, I'll spam the link to the Unintended Consequences YouTube channel. You just just subscribe to that, and then you'll get notification when I actually do get that podcast up. It's fairly comprehensive, at least the first one, and then thereafter, I probably will just do live streams like this because it prevents the issues of getting blocked by YouTube for little clips. So
now the email is, I'm going to type it right now, unintended
dot
consequences 03
3
just
three. Yep.
At what?
Gmail. Dot communist. I mean
unintended consequences 3 at gmail.com. Let me type that out properly. Unintended consequences. I think I got it right. There's a gook in my eye and my eyes keep fuzzing out. All right, hopefully I got that right. Okay. So anyway, I assume you're still collecting information and would be more than happy to keep adding to the sum total of knowledge, right?
Yes, in fact, I would. I mean, I've got the way I'm aggregating the data set up in kind of a cycle now, so I don't have to reinvent it every time a new email comes in. So when you email me, and some people have questions, what do you actually need, blah, blah, blah. So I just tell them again. The easiest things to start off with. Yeah, it's a recent Myers-Briggs personality assessment, your date of birth and city, and then a brief summary of sort of your journey, what got you into it, what were kind of the aspects, some background of your family history is great. One of the things that I take from it, without telling you too much about what to write, is that there are some things that I gain and glean from the way in which you put things in order and what you prioritize. So that's a part of it. So just be as genuine and transparent and authentic as you can. Just tell me about your experience, your journey, how it's affected you, that sort of thing, and we'll just carry on a conversation. And usually I'll follow up with you thereafter. So anyway, appreciate that.
All
Thanks,
right. The Golden Age. More writings on that. Ovid in the 6th book of the Metamorphoses. In the beginning was the Golden Age, when men of their own accord, without threat of punishment, without laws, maintained good faith and did what was right. The earth itself, without compulsion, untouched by the hoe, unfurrowed by any share, produced all things spontaneously. It was a season of everlasting spring.
Once again, there's the correlation to the whole idea of the Garden of Eden.
Yeah.
So I don't think we need to, right. I don't think we really need to ramble on much more about that. I think we actually touched on it in the previous bullet point there. So I think we're running low on time, so we might want to just keep on moving down with the notes.
Okay, well, we got half an hour and 3 more points. So, rabbinical sources recount that men lived under very favorable conditions before the deluge, and that these contributed to their sinfulness. To quote, they knew neither toil nor care, and as a consequence of their extraordinary prosperity, they grew insolent.
Doesn't that sound familiar, like Western society today? Honestly, you're talking about... there's that whole arrested development idea right there in a nutshell. If you don't have any care or responsibility or toil or anything like that, it's and everything's provided for you. That's like a constant state of childhood, which once again ties back to this whole idea of an age of innocence. So and we're looking today at another Saturnian-derived idea of what's called arrested development, like I had just mentioned. And this is the idea of putting people in a very childlike state of mind all the time. And society today is hardcore into that idea. Hollywood pushes it. This is why our television programming, and that's an important term there, programming, and everything that comes out as entertainment is kind of very low-minded and geared towards this. It's supposed to keep the average adult mind in a perpetual state of being around the emotional age of 12. So this is what this is designed to do. And this is not me making this stuff up, okay? This is covered in, different Tavistock sources and things like that. This is what they do. It's called arrested development. They want to keep people in a very childlike state so that they're dependent upon, say, government or Big Brother per se, to provide all their needs, and and they could be used by these different governments or agencies of such for whatever they see fit to do. It's a labor force, but kept in a constant slave-like state.
Sure.
You're subservient.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. You're subservient to the father figure being government or whatever other entity decides, what your fate is and, what your portion is. And that's something that's done purposely in this different entertainment type fields and things like that. Even news media, any type of media at all. All this stuff is designed to keep your mind in that state.
Of the rings of Saturn, yeah. That's interesting.
Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition. That's the type of hat I'm picturing right now.
Yeah, it's the Hey, they're saying that we lost sound.
Oh no.
So
Oh no! Let me try that again. No sound for me. Okay, so let me try that again. What about the hat? So look up Cappello Romano, and that is spelled Cappelloromano. Is everything coming through clear? It looks like my meters are okay. I must have had it muted. So, what is a Cappello Romano? It literally translates from Italian as Roman hat, but it is also known as a Saturno, Saturno, because its appearance is reminiscent of the ringed planet Saturn. Now, as far as I can tell, this thing has been worn by the Catholic clergy for hundreds of years, and that would be before telescopes were invented, if I'm not mistaken. So it's a hat with a wide circular brim and a rounded crown worn outdoors in some countries by Catholic clergy when they are dressed in a cassock. Now, unlike many other articles of clerical clothing, it serves no ceremonial purpose, but it is primarily a practical item. Now, why would they go out of their way to say something like that?
yeah, it's not that it has no specific liturgical use. That's weird, huh?
Yeah, even though it's called a Saturno. So I might call poppycock on that one. I mean, or it could just be a quinky-dink. But, this thing has been around for hundreds of years, and I don't know. Why are they calling it that? If they didn't know that this has always been my thing with Saturn, and I can't find a good answer, and I looked at this stuff quite a few times over the years. How the hell did they know that Saturn had rings? Because you can't see that with the naked eye.
Oh, maybe they had telescopes long before it was attributed to being a thing. That's a possibility, huh?
Or you can't see it with the naked eye now. I'm of the opinion that we have devolved, not evolved, and that we at one point probably had much better vision, much better health. I mean, certainly, again, according to the accounts, not only in not only in the Old Testament of the Bible, but in many other ancient accounts, people lived a very long time, and so the chances are that they were equipped much better, both physiologically and mentally. So I suspect that they could easily see it, and perhaps if you look up at the sky and you see what we now call the Milky Way, what the many of the Aboriginals and the Native Americans, they all called it the crack in the sky, right? So pretty good chance that the sky has changed. There's a lot of ancient mythology about Saturn and Jupiter being much more visible, and that Saturn was the sun at one point. So some weird stuff there. I think that the sky may have looked very different, and we may have been able to see it in a much different way.
Right. That is one of the big implications. Now, for folks wanting to hear the more common stuff, yes, there are things that are supposedly attributed to Saturn, such as ear rings worn by women to hear the whisperings of the god Saturn, or wedding rings. It's a binding spell. You are binding yourself to another person as well as the god, because what are you doing? You're taking vows before God, man, and God. Which god? Well, we've been going through this. We've been talking about how these things seem to have gone from one to the other, from El to Yahweh, and then on up into Christianity in the modern times. And the big thing I have to stress to folks that maybe they aren't aware of is that a lot of these things seem to go with the ages. The astrological ages and all of that stuff is extremely important. It's definitely important to the Vatican because it's all over the place. Not to mention their giant obelisk in Vatican Square, which is a timepiece. So anyway,
yep.
There's
not
that.
to mention their Lucifer telescope.
Well,
that's a good one.
Lucifer, as I think most people know now, means light bearer or light bringer, but it's got other connotations, does it not?
It does.
Yeah, and you would think that an entity such as the Vatican would be a little bit more, careful about what they name. Yeah,
it'd be somewhat more circumspect, right? Yeah.
Yeah, about what they name these things that they own just based upon public perception. So, when they're outright in your face telling you, this is our telescope, Lucifer, that should tell you something about the Vatican.
Yeah. Well, I think we've seen enough of their imagery that there's some dark stuff going on.
Indeed. But hey, nothing to see here in terms of, child abuse and all that sort of stuff. They would never be involved in that.
No, that doesn't go on.
Never. Not at Disney either.
No, that would never happen. All right, the deluge in rabbinical sources. During the 7 days when the world was flooded by sheets of light and terrifying signs and commotion filled the heavens, the Holy One, quote unquote, reversed the order of nature, the sun rising in the west and setting in the east. But during the deluge, the sun and the moon shed no light, and for an entire year, the planets did not follow their regular courses. It may be that because of dust discharged by volcanoes, the sky remained veiled for a long period, and this veil made any celestial orientation impossible for the survivors. But quite possibly the statement refers to a change in the celestial orbits, as we were just saying. The rabbinical sources add that the earth was quaking, and the sun was darkened, and the foundations of the cosmos were dislodged. The entire world was in volcanic activity. Quote, amidst lightnings and thunders, a very loud sound was heard in the entire world, never heard before. The flood was caused by waters pouring from above, but also by waters drawn up from the ground. Quote, all the fountains
above and the fountains beneath. Yeah.
All the fountains of the great deep were broken up, and all the windows of heaven were opened. The waters that came from the sky were heated. That's as in Heated. They were warm. Many passages in the rabbinical literature refer to the heated water. So why do I bring that up? Well, apparently this is the catastrophe that changed things from the golden age of Saturn to whatever is now, presumably.
Yep. Yep. How about that?
I have one more point, by the way, just to let everybody know. We've still got about 20 minutes left, so we're good. But it's a very long point, and it's actually written by Shalom Sela, or Sela, I'm not sure how you pronounce that, who is Professor Emeritus in the Department of Jewish Thought at Bar-Ilan University. So that'll be the final point on Saturn. It's called Saturn and the Jews.
The Professor of Jewish Thought, can he tell me what to make of free bacon?
You're the
great Jewish dilemma. Sorry.
Anyway,
Okay,
what do we make of the deluge here, gentlemen?
I think it's spot on. I think that it's been long denied by quote modern science that they kept saying there's no evidence for it, and there's evidence everywhere that even a child could see. Not including that every culture, ancient culture, had a story of it. All very similar. I think you got to be extremely self-deluded or simply in denial to reject the overwhelming evidence of it. And again, like what you just said, the rabbinicals goes hand in hand with that. That ended the golden age. I think that things changed drastically between the antediluvian world and the world afterwards. And again, according to biblical scripture, they didn't even recognize the place when they got out of the ark. That it was a completely they saw it as dead. And so the world that we have now, that we think is beautiful and lush and green, those few who survived, saw it as completely dead and lifeless. If that gives you any indication of the difference between the way it was then and the way it is now. So from all the study I can do, I've done all kinds of things, from the electromagnetic field that we have, that's the toroidal field. Everything was, all the evidence points to the fact that it was so much more powerful, going back, and that if indeed, as Dr. Carl Baugh suggested, that there's again evidence that there was twice the air pressure and about 150% more oxygen in the and nitrogen in the atmosphere, that things would have grown at an astronomical rate. You would have had huge plants, and there's again fossil evidence of that, as well as huge critters, and we have fossil evidence of that. So it's rational and reasonable to think that mankind would have been similarly a much different creature. And again, the evidence from the writings and from everything that I can tell was that it was a very different world, and this is where the tales from Atlantis come from. That golden age, to me, is Atlantis being the antediluvian world. Those are my thoughts. Take them for what you will.
And that's also kind of a tie-in where the whole idea and concept of giants comes from, because if the plant life and the animal life was much bigger in this type of more pressurized, oxygen-rich atmosphere, it would stand to reason that human beings would be bigger as well. And there has been allegedly found a lot of fossil evidence of this, of giant bones, and this is recorded going back 1,000 years or better. Thousands of years people have been finding the remains of giant humanoids. So it's one of those things that is also allegedly covered up by the Smithsonian.
I was just going to say the Smithsonian has made it
right.
has made it their entire goal to cover that up. So sure,
absolutely. And there's a great book, The Ancient Giants Who Ruled America. I can't think of the author's name off the top of my head, but that's a really good book that documents these archaeological finds of giant remains throughout all of America. So that's a book people could look up. I would highly recommend. It's very well researched, and it shows the existence of this evidence and how the Smithsonian covers it up. So, but that's neither here nor there. I wanted to touch on another point in this idea, how it talks about how the waters that came from the sky were heated.
That's interesting, huh?
It is. First of all, this delineates, the idea of the waters above and the waters below, and kind of backs up the idea that space might be something more akin to a liquid. And a common descriptor that's given of space now is it's a vacuum, and it's close to absolute zero in temperature, so it's cold. It's not warm. It's cold. And
except for the thermosphere.
Except for except for allegedly the thermosphere, which these satellites have no problem.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
They have no problem flying around in this 3,000 degree heat or whatever.
Yeah, no problem.
It's fine.
No big deal.
Yeah, but at any rate, though,
way past the melting point of aluminum. But hey, nothing to see here.
Tinfoil survives just fine going through that. I mean, look at the moon lander. So
right?
No problems. But at any rate, what I was saying is the way that these people describe things to us is often opposite of how it really is. So if they're describing space as being cold, is it maybe warm, and is it maybe more akin to a liquid than it is to a vacuum?
I think
I think so too. I mean, I think this is kind of evidence from people who are a little closer to source than us that might be the case. But also, there's an esoteric idea encoded in this too. The water from the sky was heated. Now, water is a representation of the physical, and fire is a representation of the spiritual. So this is the infusing of spirit into physicality. So I mean, this could be construed as, once again, the introduction of the divine spark per se into the physical world in one sense or another. So I mean, this is a connotation that could be made from it. But like I said, that's it's one of those things that's open to interpretation. But it's definitely something that you could see within that idea. And the idea that this water comes from the sky and it comes to the earth. Once again, the sky, air, is being a spiritual idea, and earth being a material idea. So this is the alchemical marriage between the spiritual and the physical, if you want to look at it from an alchemical standpoint. So there's a lot of things that could be derived from this whole concept.
All right, so let's get to this article as our last point on the notes I have here, but there's going to be a lot to break down, I'm sure. So again, this article is called Saturn and the Jews, and it was written by Shalom Sela, Professor Emeritus in the Department of Jewish Thought at Bar-Ilan University. Actually, it's Shlomo. This thing must have auto-corrected. I remember his name is Shlomo. Shlomo. Yeah, this thing auto-corrected. Hey, check that out. Shlomo. Yeah, his name is Shlomo Sela. Anyway, Professor Emeritus in the Department of Jewish Thought at Bar-Ilan University. Underlying the well-known link between Saturday, or Shabbat in Hebrew, and Saturn, Shabbatai in Hebrew, is the reference to Saturn as the planet in charge of the Jews. Now remember, this is a Jewish person saying all this, so keep that in mind.
Interesting. Okay.
Behind the link between Saturn and Saturday is the astrological theory that assigns the 7 planets in succession, beginning with the sun and following the order of their orbits, to the 24 hours of the day and to the 7 days of the week. Prominent Roman historians, as well as church fathers like Augustine, acknowledged a special link between Saturday and Saturn, the holiest day of the week for the Jews. That Jewish society of the Talmudic period recognized the same association is shown by the fact that the Babylonian Talmud refers to Saturn as Shabbatai, for example, the star of Shabbat or Saturday. Greek and Arab astrology, however, considered Saturn to be the most malignant of the 7 planets, and thus the Jews, astrologically governed by Saturn, were considered to be contaminated by the planet's wicked nature. Abraham ibn Ezra, who lived approximately 1089 to 1161, is the first Jewish thinker to deal with the problematic link between Saturn, Saturday, and the Jews. He addresses the astrological association throughout his writings, both scientific and non-scientific. He removes the sting of this embarrassing linkage by stressing that Saturn is actually conducive to a Jew's religious faith. In his long commentary on Exodus 20:13, Ibn Ezra associates Saturn with the 4th commandment, ordaining one to, quote, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy, from Exodus 28. And he explains that this correspondence allows the Jews, by not occupying themselves with everyday matters, but devoting themselves solely to the fear of God on this day to protect themselves from Saturn's baneful influence and also to improve the quality of their religious belief. So there's a lot in there. Who wants to take it first?
I had some interesting conversation with a rabbi, and one of the things I found fascinating in the description was, we were talking about his the fact that according to him they have been a people with broken legs for a long time because they have no place for their temple, right? They can't do their sacrifices, and he said it's interesting, and that's the only place that they have that is sacred, because they're culturally, and this is the part that I found really interesting, is they don't think in terms of sacred places. What they have is sacred time, and so the feasts and these things were set apart as sacred, and that's really interesting when you combine that with again, the Genesis story said that at the end of the 6 days of creation, that the Creator saw that all He had made was very good, and that He rested on that day and sanctified it, made it holy. And then when you get to again Exodus 20, in which is the Ten Commandments, it's the only one that begins with remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. All the others kind of begin with do this and do this, thou shalt not, and that sort of thing. This is the only one that said remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, and so that it was set apart. And then they were saying, the instructions there are don't do any work, don't do these, your own thing. Don't work. Basically, spend the time in meditation and contemplation. And I find that very interesting. And from my perspective, I guess, is that if the Creator did set aside specific time, that would be that He blessed it. From my perspective, it's good for me to take advantage of that, and so I have for many years tried to set apart that time and just allow for a deeper communion with my Creator on that day. And to me, again, some people probably say that's a placebo effect or whatever, but from my own personal experience, I find that the idea of a Sabbath and a day of rest is immensely beneficial, and I miss it very much when I'm not able to take advantage of it. But for many years, I've try to do that, but I found it again. I found fascinating the idea that the rabbi saying that they don't think in terms of sacred space, but rather sacred time. Again, with the different feasts and that they have, the Feast of the Tabernacles, the Feast of Trumpets, and the Jubilee cycle, which is another fascinating study. If you get into the study of the Jubilee cycle, that was 49 years in the 50th year. They returned all the land to its original owner. Slaves were set free. Debts were canceled. It's a very, very interesting concept. So yeah, the idea of this of the Sabbath and there being time, and then we get back to the idea of Chronos, or Saturn, being sort of the Lord of time. It's again a very interesting dichotomy there.
Yeah, and I kind of agree with you, and I think the concept of the Jubilee year is something that really relates more to a common sense approach to things, and a kind of a natural law approach to things. This in this year, this would be every 49 years. There's your cycle of 7 by 7.
7 by 7, sure.
Right.
And yeah, and one of the things what they let the land rest, right? So you didn't plant any crops, right?
Absolutely.
It's
that was
very
the point
interesting.
I was just going to make.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
And even farmers or anybody that works the land would tell you that, every 7th year, I think it is, they usually will let the land rest or something, so that it could replenish itself. But it's important that during this Jubilee time, it's kind of a big reset for everything. Like you said, anybody who's indebted, their debts are forgiven, slaves are set free, that kind of a thing. And this was a tradition that was observed, and I think the world would be a better place today if it was still observed. It's really a common sense kind of practice, because it's, once again, this goes back to the whole free will idea as well, because all these things, all these man-made things are going to come to an end. So whether you're bound by some of these different constraints like debt or indentured servitude or whatever you may call it. There should be a period of time when that time's up. You should be freed from that and, allowed to regain your free will and to get your bearings back. So I think the Jubilee year concept is something that's sadly lacking in our society today.
Agreed. Well, as well as the idea of just a day of rest and a Sabbath idea is one of the things in my study of the this whole awakening project and the means and methods being used by the controllers to keep us distracted. Fear is one of the big ones, but extreme busyness is another one, right? Is that that we cannot functionally think when we're stressed out, and so we're much more easily controlled when we're tired and when we're unable to think. And so that's one of the things that they do. For example, that's why that is why the news comes on at night, because you're unable to. You're so tired. You can't think through the things critically, and you just absorb it. And this is why most of the programming happens at night as well. That they chose these times so that you would be specifically unable to critically think through it. And they keep you so busy and so occupied and in a fearful state that you can't really contemplate. And you have, again, with the modern media, such a short attention span that you can't really cogently think through things. And so the idea of taking a moment of rest and a day of meditation to get grounded, and I'm into that. Take off your shoes and get grounded to the earth and get reconnected to nature is a fabulous thing, right? So whether again, it's not a religious thing for me, but it's a connection to my Creator. To try to reconnect with the Creator and His creation is to take that time and to release myself from the responsibilities of the world, and that a reminder that I may be in it, but I'm not of it, and keeps me grounded, so to speak. So I totally agree with you. Jubilee and Day of Rest the world would be an immensely better place if we all took a moment to remember that, and also remember again that we're all creations and we're all brothers and sisters, and they're not your enemy. But anyway, absolutely. I agree 100%, and that's actually a spiritual need that people have that they may not be aware of. You need this day of rest, a day to reflect on things and to think and to commune with the Creator. However you want to view that. A day away from the daily grind and the daily responsibility of all the physical labor, and this is something that the powers that be have been trying to eliminate from the human condition. I mean, there used to be a time when everything was closed on a Sunday in this country because of this whole idea. Yep.
And now, basically, everything's it's a 24/7 society we live in. So it's go all the time. And this relates back to a document called "Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars," wherein it talks about keeping. How does it word it? Keeping people busy so that they're just like animals down on the farm with no time to really think things through or really reflect upon, their condition that they're in.
Absolutely.
So, and this is part of the control structure. This is actually what it's about. And if nobody's heard of that document, I would highly suggest look it up and read it. It's called "Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars," and it's basically an outline of.
It's an eye opener for sure.
Yeah, of how the social engineering is done. So that could be a good homework assignment for people. And there's a lot of Saturnian concepts bound up in that as well, because it is about controlling your time and constraining your energies to basically work and being busy and too busy to really think about your lot in life, just to keep you busy and distracted, and that way you're controllable.
Yeah, I saw Owen Benjamin show up in DLive chat, and hey man, we're trying to serve up the gravy for you. So
I was just going to mention that.
Welcome,
good
Big Bear.
Good to see you showing up, Owen.
See, that derailed us, but
it's not at all. We're almost done.
Hey, we've been off the rails for a long time.
For a while, right? So, but yeah, we try to get the good gravy going here. So, but yeah, bring everybody back to the idea of reconnecting with their Creator and taking that time, and I think that again would be, as we said, great for everybody.
Now,
Absolutely.
Since we're almost done here, this is not a topic we can just do 1 week and then all of a sudden that's it. There's so much to this, and we'll be coming back to touch on this quite a few times. Bill Cooper, yes, definitely the whole Bill Cooper thing. Looks like we got a last-minute super chat from Mountain Smithy for $5. Thanks, man. Hermes translates as to draw out that which is hidden in darkness, which is the secret fire of Saturn led the hidden one. Spirit world. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mountain Smithy. I always like to see your little posts every week. These are great. Thank you. But anyway, what I would really like to explore is more about the concept of El, and just how far back can we go. I did quite a bit of homework in the past couple of days for this show, but there's definitely a lot more we can get out of this. But who wants to get in some final words here before we wrap her up?
This is a great topic, and again, I think it's difficult to go deep enough into the idea of this Saturnian symbology. It's been throughout history. You can see it everywhere, and as you've discussed, and all those great points you came up with, Jason. I mean, again, we discovered, I think all of us, that depending on the source material, it's going to be kind of leading you down different trails, but there is certainly correlation between all of it. So it's a fascinating topic, no matter how you look at it, and certainly one that the controllers are deeply into. And with that, and from final words for me is, again, working on this awakening project. If you guys want to be a part of that, send an email to unintended.consequences3@gmail.com. We'll get you in part of that, and you can certainly visit my channel, Unintended Consequences. You'll see it there in the chat. I'll just kind of spam it here. There's the white rabbit there. Follow him. Again, the podcast that was supposed to have been up this last Sunday got derailed because of YouTube algorithms. So I'm just going to redo that and reset, and we'll drop back 5 yards and punt. But that basically explains a little bit more about the project and what we're trying to do there, to try to put some scientific methodology into the awakening process, not only what causes people to wake up, but how we might better wake other people up. And there's some very interesting correlation. I think the proof of concept has certainly been proven. Some of my original hypotheses have been proven out. I can't make any promises, but ultimately I think we can get closer to a better understanding of what's involved here. Not only the means and methods that are being used against us by the controller, but how we might break free of that in a cogent, cohesive, coherent way, and maybe come up with a kind of a deep programming script for other people to get them to plant those seeds. Right. So other people have been doing a great job of it, and there are a bunch of different channels that go through this. But I know that we all in this community often talk about what makes the difference between those who wake up and those who are woolies. There does seem to be a difference, and we can measure that, and there's some metrics to it. So I'm finding that out. And so again, if you want to send me an email, unintended.consequences3@gmail.com, we'll get you in as part of the program. I'm not gonna, we're not gonna crack your bank account or anything. Just asking you some just basic stuff. Primarily start with a recent Myers-Briggs personality assessment. Give you the 4-letter score there, the percentages if they offer it, your birth date and location, and then a brief description of your background and the awakening process, how it's gone for you, what woke you up, how it's affected you, that sort of stuff. And we'll start kind of a back and forth, and then as we enter phase two is going to come up. But this has been really overwhelming. The responses have been great, so I appreciate that. Anyway, so look forward to seeing you on that podcast. It's going to be very different from these others that are not really getting so much in the conspiracies as in the personal journeys of people who are waking up and what it means to them. So there you go.
All right, Wayne, what do you want to say in yours as your parting words?
Well, just looking at the concept of El or Saturn and how far back it goes back way before the written word. So, I mean, it's, oral tradition and everything carried forward. So there's really no telling how far back it could go. I mean, it's disputable what the actual age of the Earth even is, first of all. So it would be near impossible for us to really pinpoint down the oldest usage of this or the origin thereof. But I do think it stands to reason that it does relate back to original language and, the spoken word, because in the beginning was the word. So that's the very foundation of where we all came from when you look at it from, a spiritual viewpoint. So, it's basically ties back to what consciousness is, where we came from, where we're going, what this place really is, and what it's all about. And nobody really has the answers to that, but it is always good to ponder. But, closing remarks here, I would say a lot of people seem concerned about the whole coronavirus thing going on in society. Don't buy it, guys. All the fear and stuff they're pushing in the media, don't buy it. Yes, it may actually be a thing, but honestly, the way that they're just ramping this thing up, it's just beyond the pale at this point. So don't buy into the fear. Don't feed the beast, okay? Don't feed the trolls, as they say in the internet lingo.
And don't get the vaccine either.
No.
Yeah. So
don't do that.
Don't buy into it. Don't go spreading the fear yourself and that kind of thing. It's unbelievable just how far they've taken it, and they're going to keep on pushing it. But I just want people to rest assured, I just don't feed the fear. Don't feed into the fear, because this, when it comes down to it, they're utilizing an archonic type force to generate more fear and really pull this thing full-fledged into the mainstream reality, so that they could use it for whatever they see fit. If they want to lock down an entire city, they'll lock down an entire city. Yep. That's what I see it being used for. Whether there's something to merit that or not, who could say for sure? I mean, I don't think it's anything that's going to be any different than any of these other alleged pandemics we've had in the past couple of years.
Yeah, and if you want to believe what the Bible says, it's that God didn't give us a spirit of fear, but a power and love and a sound mind, right? So, and then there's nothing to fear but fear itself. So don't give into that.
Right. So look at it with a sound mind. Use a little common sense behind it. Like think about it. Like, how would you react if if somebody was spreading a cold around? Like it's the same kind of thing. Or if the flu, you don't react in panic about the flu, and it's the same kind of thing. It's not exactly the same, but it's the same kind of thing.
I don't know. So Owen says he got the vaccine and it turned him gay. So I don't know, man.
Stop it.
Ooh.
It's fruity. It's fruity pebbles. Alrighty then.
Oh,
that was that Gatorsil vaccine, wasn't it?
Oh, that was it. I kept using my coxaflopin, and
that's for something different, though, Bob.
Oh, I got you. Okay.
But at any rate, don't buy into the fear, guys. Don't feed into it.
In the words of Douglas Adams, don't panic, and always
don't panic.
Know where your towel is.
I've got my towel right here.
All right, let's wrap it up. Thanks so much, guys, everyone being here. Good to see so many of the people I love the most. I don't have a topic for next week yet. I'm going to discuss that as soon as we get off the air here. But thank you so much to everybody for being here. Thanks for the super chats. And take care. We'll see you next week.
to see.
Will speak, manifest. This I be, my angel,
For all to see.
will speak, manifest. Yes, I need my angel for all to see, manifest. Yes, I need my angel. The universe will speak, manifest. This I need, my angel, for all to see.